Hello everyone, you're watching Global Leaders Network, WINTV. I'm your host, Yun. There are many leaders globally in areas such as government, business, non-for-profit organization, art industry, education, etc. Global Leaders Network invites variety types of leaders and shares their inspirational stories. Today, I invited Sabastian. Long time no see. How are you today?
It's good to see you, my friend. Thank you. And congratulations on the launch of your show.
You're welcome. So tell us about yourself and also your organization.
Yes. So my name is Sabastian Agignoae. I'm 24 years old, and I currently lead the operations for the International Orchestra of Refugees, which is a nonprofit whose mission is to empower displaced musicians to become musical ambassadors of peace through orchestral opportunity and collaborative opportunity. I also serve as a chairman on the board of directors for the International Orchestra of Refugees. I'm also a professional fellow with the U.S. State Department and the United Nations Association of Chicago, where I work with the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia, kind of working on assessing bilateral relations between the United States and Indonesia through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is part of the 2030 agenda that the United Nations ratified in 2015. I was born and raised in the Chicagoland area, and I'm also an avid competitive sailboat racer with my team, Vayu. I went to school at Loyola University, Chicago, where I studied biochemistry and a minor in music. So music has always been a part of my life. And with right now, my main forte, the work I do is with the International Orchestra of Refugees, and our mission, we're looking to go from refugee site to refugee site, recruiting displaced musicians into a full-sized conventional orchestra of refugee musicians.
I see. So where did you get the idea of launching your organization?
Yes. So a couple years ago, I was looking through my family's security box for my social security card when I happened to come across a document from 1988 signed by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And it had my family's last name on it. And when I saw that, I said to my parents, I was extremely puzzled. Guys, what are we doing with the United Nations? And my dad, he sits me down, and he says you should probably sit down for this. And then he told me of how he escaped Romania as a refugee, something that he didn't share with me until that day. I was 23, but I was just about to turn 23. And at that moment, my heart was tapped to look more into the refugee crisis. I realized, I'm the son of a refugee, and it's the refugee people I will serve. So I looked more into the refugee crisis, and I saw how staggering a lot of these numbers were. How there are now about 68 million displaced persons around the world, 20 million of which are registered refugees. Less than 1% of that population of refugees are resettled into a third country, with the other 99% still in transit in refugee camps, and they can stay in refugee camps on an average of 12 years. And some people, half of the refugees are children or youth under the age of 18. A lot of them are born into these refugee camps. So when I learned that, God tapped my heart to kind of change direction and serve the refugee community in whatever capacity. And I knew that music for me has always had a strong influence in my life. And so that's when the Orchestra of Refugees came to fruition.
Oh, I see. So do you have any religion? And because I haven't met a lot of people who help refugees, it seems like they have a faith group, behind them and help them, So I was wondering, you also believe in God and also how your faith actually influenced the way you are right now?
Yeah, so faith has always had a significant influence in my life, especially within the past few years. You know, I say God tapped my heart to do this. I was actually, how this really came about, I remember I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, and there's this piece by Marc Chagall called The White Crucifixion. And it's this crucifix of Jesus. It's a beautiful piece, and Marc Chagall is a well-celebrated Chicago artist. And when I saw this crucifix of Jesus, and I remember being by myself in that room, you know, and I heard this voice, "Give it to the refugees." Because at that point in time, I was creating a live multimedia light display for an orchestra. When I heard that voice, "Give it to the refugees," I have never heard a voice with so much confidence before, and you know, I was the only one in that room too. So I took that and I said, okay, show me the path, show me where to go, and I'll do it. I'll do the work for you. I'm a Christian. I grew up practicing Catholicism. My family and I, we go to Willow Creek Church in Barrington, and I'm proud to say I know who I am because I know who I belong to. And so with this project, with all the ups and downs, all glory goes to him, definitely.
Because I remember you came to Willow Creek prayer room one time, right?
Yeah.
You remember that time?
Which is where we met.
Yeah.
Can I tell you that story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so we were a few months campaigning into the orchestra, and there was this boy that my family and a family friend was hosting from Poland. His name is Antek. And Antek, he's about 14 to 15 years old. He's in Poland. He's back in Poland right now. But by that point in time, we had gone to the United Nations twice. We had come back from Hong Kong. I had just gotten back from the TED headquarters in New York City. I was so empowered by the work we were doing, but at the same time, I was so overwhelmed. And I remember Antek, we were at church. I'd just gotten back from New York. We were at church. He says to me, "Hey, have you ever been in that prayer room?" And we were 7 years into attending that church. And I said, "No, I haven't." And he says, "I think you should go." And so I went, and that's where I met you. And that's where we prayed. I remember praying about my family, and I remember praying about my brother specifically at that time for him, and for the work of the IOR. And I remember as soon as we finished, you said to me, "Hey, I have someone that you should meet." And that was Andrew, our good friend Andrew, who leads operations for Enoch Emancipate North Koreans, which is a nonprofit here in Chicago that works with North Korean defectors and refugees. Incredibly prominent work with, I think, about 24 refugees, North Korean refugees here in Chicago. I think about 200 total in the United States.
Right.
And that led to, I remember Andrew introduced the idea of applying to Harvard. And so he pushed me to do that, and I applied to Harvard, and I'm so happy to say that I got in. So I'll be attending Harvard University for a master's in public policy this fall. It's a 2-year program, which I'm extremely humbled. It means a lot for my family too. But all this just because a 14 or 15-year-old boy from Poland, Antek, said, "Hey, I think you should go to that prayer room." So a lot of this came from a prayer, which is really neat. And now we have this great friendship. And again, congratulations on the launch of the show. I'm extremely proud of you too.
Thank you so much. I was going to ask you that my next question was actually about the Harvard University, but you already answered it, so I cannot ask you that. Thank you for the answer.
I can talk a little bit about what I hope to do there.
Yeah, what is your vision in Harvard then?
So it's going to be a 2-year program, and what I'm really excited about, it's a prestigious university with incredible professors, and I'm really looking forward to rigorous scholarship and collaboration with my classmates. I think people from 133 different countries applied to this program. So it's going to be exceptionally diverse. And I know that its curriculum, they really work on building principled and effective public leaders to tackle compelling issues like climate change, displacement, famine, war. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the curriculum and the tools that they provide to me and my students, how we can all come together to really, I'm looking to accelerate the work of the International Orchestra of Refugees while I'm there. And I know that the International Organization for Migration says that by 2050, an estimated 200 million persons are looking to be displaced because of climate change. So something I'm looking at doing, because climate refugees isn't really too internationally defined right now. I'm looking to see what policy we can create to help protect and support and advocate for climate refugees. And I know that's something that the International Orchestra of Refugees will be campaigning for too, looking to support people who are displaced and affected because of climate change, because it's a compelling issue, and the world today is we're experiencing a refugee crisis at an unprecedented level. And so I'm going to do all that I can at Harvard and try to really leverage that education to see how I can help this refugee community.
Who's going to take care of your organization while you're gone?
Good question. So I had to ask the board, kind of for their blessing for me to take on this master's program too, because it's going to be a huge commitment. And we came up together. I'll be concurrently tackling this master's program and leading the International Orchestra of Refugees concurrently together. But with the support of the board of directors, with the support of our team. We have a strong team, and it's growing. Our board is growing, our team is growing, and so we're working together. Through partnership, we can make a lot of good things happen.
I see.
It'll be hard, but
right. It will pay off everything, you know. Yeah, you know, at the end, you know. What is success to you?
There's this JFK. He says something along the lines of, if politicians knew poetry and if poets knew politics, then the world would be a little bit of a better place to live. So there's this poem by Emerson. It goes along the lines of, what is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded. I remember a couple of years ago, I was listening to the sermon, and the pastor was talking about how the blessing is outside the comfort zone. When I heard that, I welcomed that with my heart open. I've been living with that ever since. How really for the past couple of years, I feel like I've been living outside that comfort zone, seeking those blessings. And it's tough living outside your comfort zone. And it wasn't until recently, I think a few weeks ago, where a friend of mine says, it sounds like then you've been living in your courage zone. And I said, I hope so. I think that makes so much sense, because living in that courage zone, I really have been able to find the most success, both professionally, personally, spiritually, and that's something I celebrate every day. Living outside that comfort zone.
What brings you happiness?
So something I've actually really reflected on is, for me, is happiness really is a choice in the same way that fear is a choice. And I've come to learn that perfect love drives out fear, and how how I choose to follow faith over fear and not let fear dictate the course of my life. How happiness really is within us. And I've been able to find that by pursuing some of my passions, by playing music, especially with other people. I think it's a great way to communicate with other people. What I've come to learn is, even with the work with the International Orchestra of Refugees, while there are displaced musicians who come from different parts of the world speaking different languages, music is the one language we all have in common. So playing music with others really brings me happiness. Being with my sailing team and being out in the water and having the wind hit those sails, that's something that brings me happiness. Being able to, set aside time, put aside some work and be with my family, be with friends, that brings me happiness. Being with friends and family in the outdoors, especially hiking, traveling, immersing myself in nature, in God's beauty, and running. These are a lot of things that bring me happiness. And really, when it comes to success and happiness, something that I learned is money really isn't a metric to measure how much success or happiness one has. Far from, actually, when really it's other non-materialistic things that have been able to bring me that.
I see. Tell us about good and bad leadership traits.
Great question. It's something I'm learning every day. And I think leading and learning are really indispensable to each other. Going back to JFK, he says a prominent line, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And when finding great examples of leadership, when you seek for that, I just suggest you look to some of the world's most successful, greatest orchestras and look to its conductors. And there you'll find remarkable examples of leadership. A conductor who, you don't have to lead like a conductor someone who dictates and conducts in a kind of a tyrannical way, but someone who shows up to rehearsal, who really has a tenacious sense of the outer architecture of that music, within which there's this immense personal freedom for the members of the orchestras to really flourish. I think that is a space where trust is really able to flourish and grow. There's this immense amount of trust. There's this unshakable bond of trust between a conductor and the members of this orchestra. One that, where everyone is playing the same song or narrative that they believe in. I think that's really where leadership is able to flourish from a conductor standpoint. For example, Daniel Barenboim, he currently leads the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. Have you heard of that before? So it's kind of a neat model. Half of the orchestra, and this is where I learned that music as an ambassador of peace isn't a novel concept. Half of the orchestra is from Israel, and half of them are from Palestine. And so when they meet in the summers to rehearse in Spain, Daniel Barenboim, who was one of the conductors at the Chicago Symphony before Riccardo Muti, he's someone who encourages fight, debate, dialogue between the Israeli and Palestinian people. But at the end of the day, at every rehearsal, he says, great, now let's put aside those differences and let's focus on something that brings us together, music. And so they end each day with a rehearsal. And I think that's a strong example of leadership. And that's something that I strive for every day.
What is the biggest obstacles in your life while you're achieving your dream and your vision?
So when I think of the biggest obstacles, I think of the story from the Bible, David and Goliath, where David is the youngest of 8 brothers. His brothers are serving in the army with the Israelites. And David's dad says to David, go to your brothers with some lunch. And so David goes. And when he arrives, they're in battle with the Philistines. And there's this one warrior in the Philistines his name is Goliath. He stands over 9 foot tall. Every one of the Israelites is afraid to fight him. And really Goliath is looking for the strongest warrior of the Israelites to fight. But no one from the Israelites wanted to fight him. When David heard of this, he says to the king, I will fight him. This young boy who was small, and everyone is laughing. Everyone at the same time is afraid to fight Goliath, except David, because he knows God is stronger. And so when I think of a lot of the work that I do, especially with the refugee crisis, I look at the refugee crisis as a Goliath, and sometimes I am afraid to face that because of how immense it is. It's really overwhelming. When I was at the United Nations last year, I remember visiting because they were amidst negotiations for the Global Compact on Migration, which was ratified in Morocco in Marrakesh of December 2018. And I remember because a colleague of mine was working with the Mission of the Holy See, who serves as a permanent observer, and just being kind of told of how discussions and negotiations were going, and being told a lot of these countries are just overwhelmed with the refugee crisis. They really don't know what to do because it's getting worse and worse. And I think that's my Goliath right now. Sometimes it feels defeating, rewarding too, but also defeating. Rewarding because of the stories and the people that I get to meet. Like I remember recently meeting a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo who was in a refugee camp for about 18 years. His name is Masudi, and now he's resettled in Chicago, where he lives in Rogers Park area. He went from being a carpenter in this refugee camp in Tanzania, and he was picked up in Chicago, and now he creates beautiful harps. He has no musical background at all. And hearing a story like that, an exceptional story of resiliency, that for me that's what is rewarding about this. But it's also defeating. It's really easy. There's been times in the story where I've fallen and struggled, and I realized that as a global community, in light of the refugee crisis, we're falling. In light of the climate crisis, we're falling. But what's really important about that is that we have to direct our attention to not the fact that we've fallen, but how we pick ourselves back up. Because everyone loves a good comeback story. And with the refugee crisis at an unprecedented level today, the decisions we make now and the actions we make now, what we do and what we don't do, will set the tone for the era to come. And that's why I'm really excited to be and humbled to be going to Harvard this fall to learn more about the skill sets and to learn about how we can move forward as principled and effective citizens of this globe, how we can work together to really make the world a better place.
How can we help your organization?
Good question. So a lot of the with the immigration. With immigration today and the refugee crisis, especially in this nation today, it's become such a polarized topic, as I'm sure you can agree with me on that. And I've heard people from one side or the other, share their feelings and views of how they view refugees as lowly people. I've heard even terrorists before. But what's important for people to know is that refugees aren't terrorists. In fact, they are oftentimes the first victims of terrorism. As a global community, what you can do by helping our organization is understand that this world won't be destroyed by people who do evil, but by people who stand there and watch them without doing anything. And I didn't say that. Einstein said that. Einstein was right about how black holes look like and gravitational waves. So something tells me that Einstein could be right about this too. And he was a refugee too. So in terms of how we can help, I know that moving forward, a lot of people can sign up for our newsletter on iorefugees.org. I know in the future we're going to be launching campaigns for an instrument drive, so we can gather instruments for these musicians. I know we'll be launching some fundraisers and some end-of-year campaigns. I know that we'll be also starting to host programs. As soon as we establish a lot of the infrastructure for the organization, which it's harder than it looks. But there will be opportunities and to learn more about how you can help by visiting iorefugees.org and signing up for a newsletter.
Okay, I will sign it up. I will sign it up for your organization. Definitely. Any comments to our audiences and refugees?
Yes. I really have hope for what things will look like. But moving forward, when we think of the future, oftentimes we don't think past the year 2050. But in order to kind of build a sustainable future, something about this, our mission with the International Orchestra of Refugees, something that I've learned is throughout history, civilizations have been remembered by the art that they leave behind. Not necessarily by their engineers or lawyers. Granted, that's all very important work. But if you take a look at the course of history, oftentimes what we remember from past civilizations is the art that they leave behind. And so this is a strong opportunity for the refugee community to come together, write their story, and change the future. Change the course of what the refugee crisis will look like. Right now, it's 68 million people, and with the climate crisis progressively getting worse, that number of people who are displaced will just be growing and growing. So what's important is not only, finding hope and hearing those pep talks, but instilling action. What can we do? Because what we do and what we don't do will set, like I said before, will set the tone for the era to come.
Thank you for sharing your story today.
Of course. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Lois.
The International Orchestra of Refugees, we're going to be celebrating 1 year as an incorporated organization where we signed our letters of incorporation last July. And so we're a newly developed organization, and we have a strategic plan moving forward. We have kind of a 5-year plan, so it's gonna come time until we see a physical orchestra of refugees. But as a precursor to a physical orchestra, what we're gonna establish is a virtual database of displaced musicians. One that will feature on our website, so that we can connect the global community with these refugees, with these stories of resiliency. Because the name refugee, it shouldn't be looked at as a name of just burden and tragedy, but really refugee, it should be looked at as a badge of honor, a badge of strength, a badge of resiliency. And that's what I look at every time I hear those refugee stories and meet these refugee people. My dad being a refugee once, I'm proud to say I'm the son of a refugee, and it's the refugee people I will serve. And I'm going to continue moving forward with that, and I know that for my next 2 years at Harvard, I'm going to look to accelerate that mission further. And I know Harvard is also, there's a lot of incredible projects being undertaken there, and I'm excited for what's to come and how we can work together to support social initiatives like this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, so.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Global Leaders Network WINTV. If you want to watch this again, you can watch this through our YouTube and website. But don't forget to subscribe us. I want to see all of you next Thursday, 9 p.m. Until then, have a wonderful week. Bye-bye, everyone.